Hi and welcome to another 5 minutes tutorial, and this time it will be texture coordinate and object. So if I drag the object to the surface, you get this with green, red and yellow and black, which you already know since that is the same pattern you get when you use the UV and then center by using subtract and multiply, which we have done many times before. But the big difference between the UV and the object is that object is always centered, and it's centered in 3 dimensions. You remember that in the UV we could manipulate the UV, it didn't have to be in center, but for the object it is always in the center. And we have the X and the Y and the Z axis, so if I just exchange this to like a cube, then I just press delete here, press Shift A, and go to mesh and cube, and I select the material I was working with. So select material here. You can see we have some blue in here as well, and that we didn't get with UV because blue is the Z-axis and the depth. So if I separate object here by using separate X, Y, Z, you can see here when I use that axis that you have -1 in the bottom here, and you have a +1 in the top here. And for the y-axis is the same as we had with the UV, so 1 here, -1 here, x-axis the same thing, negative here and positive here, exactly the same thing. So you have this in 3 direction, and the thing here is then that everything is centered from the beginning. So if I use a texture, let's say that I use a magic texture, I don't have to think about the UV map, I just drag from the object to the factor to the surface, and everything is nice here. I went through generated, and you remember that when I scaled it, generated got distorted. So we tried a thing here as well, so I scale it in X, and it got distorted. But that is only because we didn't apply the scale. So if you press Ctrl A and apply the scale here, it will remain the scale that it has from beginning, so it will not increase in size, it will not be distorted, it will just be nice like this. So that is the really good thing with object. You can always use it to just spread the texture out on a plane or an object or something like that in a good way. But there is another thing, so I can take this away. And I can do a UV sphere, so I go and select mesh and a UV sphere, so we have that here, and we can also smooth it a little bit, so shade smooth, so it looks a little bit nicer. And if I now take the material again, material 1 here, you see we have our thing here, but I will now change magic, so I will take that away, and I will instead use vector math or the length. So put that in here and put that here. And what happens now is that we have the length in the center, which means in the middle of this sphere here. So it's black in the middle, but you can't see it because it gets more and more white out here. So everything you see is white. I can use a subtract here and you can see the difference. So if I put in a subtract and take this to the bottom, and put 1 in the top, you can then see that almost everything is almost black, because it's not quite 1 out here, but almost, so very dark gray. So it uses the middle all the time. But what we can do more is that we can add another thing, so we can add an empty. So I press Shift A and I use an empty and put that in here and just move it out a bit. Then we can use that as a locator for the starting point of the object. So if I just select my empty here, then I can move this empty closer to the sphere, and now you see what happens. So when I use the empty, you can see that that is the center of the empty. So we can control that, and that is really good when you would like to do a mask. As you remember, we use mask to mask away stuff and so on. So let's say that you would like to have moss on some places, or it should be like some bleach from the sun, so it will be less colored on some places and so on. Then you can just use an empty and put it in here and put the object using that empty, and then you get the center here instead of the actual object. And that is the really nice and neat thing with object output here. Okay, so that was my 5 minutes, and now you know a little bit about object. So I just say bye for now and see you tomorrow.